Hello, I'm Mycroft Holmes,
And I'm Falconeer 111.
and in today's episode we futz around a little and then do some more work for Saeed. I really like Saeed. He seems like a cool dude to hang out with.
He seems like
He's
I'm
he's he's an amoral mercenary, a like power broker, but he's like affable about it.
yeah. And he's like he's not like the kind of he's the sort of person who considered using drugs, but he has to be around for a while, so he decided it just wasn't worth the consequences. Like, but he definitely does smoke. I bet he drinks. Does he drink?
We don't see him drink, but I absolutely bet he drinks.
Yeah.
I mean, ancient cultures were all about party time.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's a lot of booze and a lot of like Uh, they've remade Egyptian and Mesopotamian beer, and it sucks. It's basically liquid bread. Um, and so, well, okay, that's not bad, but it is very low quality by modern standards, very grainy, and it, I mean, it also doesn't use any hops, which by modern standards makes it like pee. Even though I agree, I hate hops, and I don't understand it, and I don't understand why. Do you know, like, have I ever done my IPA rant on this LP?
I believe you have.
Yeah. So that's not something that I am too opposed to. Yeah, all the like corpses in this game or like undead things and rakshasas and everything have the same face. It's just like the slash smile.
Yeah, I futz around with this quest a little bit. Because normally when you use an object like the earlier metal detector quest in uh, Blue Mountains, it'll show the thing and then you use the thing. Here you're supposed to just sort of position yourself and then use the shovel and you dig up the object,
Hmm.
which
Yeah,
is
and that's the issue right there.
yeah, that's out of the normal for what this game has taught you to do.
That's always a very like designer logic has its issues. It's
Let me tell you the biggest issue with design logic, and I think I might have mentioned this ages ago. There is a quest in Tokyo where you have to go to previous levels and find hidden floppy disks. Find a computer and then play a text adventure game in each instance.
uh,
And it I mean, I get what they're doing. It's very interesting story wise, but gameplay wise it is not fun.
yeah, gameplay because yeah,
Because they
it's
don't give you a list of objectives or what you can do. It's very much take cell phone. Well, they didn't mention there was a cell phone. Hide behind shower curtain. We're in a bathroom, so there's a shower curtain, but you didn't mention there was a shower curtain.
hmm
It's very much.
yeah
It's
it
very much solely the developer's logic.
yeah. I do get the point that they cut a lot of corners late in this game. I mean, it's modern game development. They cut corners anywhere. Developers cut corners anywhere they can, so they don't work their fingers off until they fall off. But there are points in this game
I
where
mean,
it's like
like
you didn't care. You had to just go. You had to get home before your kids woke up in the morning. That's kind of the case for most games these days. So
yeah, I don't begrudge them it. Like they
no,
made
yeah,
a overall, I think, a quality product that is very interesting and I wouldn't say innovative, but creative in parts for
yeah,
what they
creative.
had to work with.
Um, like my dad has worked in this field before, in the field of learning before. He has a whole thing about the difference between innovation and creativity. And it basically boils down to innovation is making things that are new, and creativity is combining things that are old in unusual ways. And you can be like George Lucas never innovated a thing in his life, but he was I talking like he said, he is extremely creative. And he combines a bunch of things that already existed on their own in a bunch of really unusual ways to make stuff like Star Wars. And that's why Star Wars works. There's not everything there has a precedent, but you don't you don't ever see it mixed in quite as like coherent and intelligent a way. And this game is, this game's about conspiracy theories and legends. Of course, nothing is innovative in it, but it's just remixing it in a billion different ways, and that's what makes it interesting.
So, like, Warren Spector has said he couldn't make Deus Ex nowadays because of what conspiracy theories have become. Do you think they could make another game like this with what conspiracy theories have become?
With, like, Secret World?
Yeah.
Probably not, but okay. I actually did some reading on this, just on completely, like... Okay, have you ever heard the term conspirituality?
No.
It's an idea that basically... It treats like... At the end of the day, conspiracy theory is born from a need to find hidden knowledge, or knowledge you think is hidden, even if that is actually just complete bullshit. And that's one of many ways to approach religion and to approach spirituality. And there's a big overlap there, and there are a lot of people who act in accordance with their belief about various conspiracy theories in ways that are very similar to how they act about religion, to the point that you get a lot of people who express, usually it's Christianity, but it can also be just about any religion, like Hinduism. This happens a lot as well. They express their religion in terms of conspiracy theories, and in terms of like reacting to these ideas like you would react to a conspiracy theory. These days, it's really hard to do what this is, because so much of modern conspiracy thinking is strongly tied into religion and is strongly tied into political identity and personal identity. So you can't really isolate it and connect it to anything else without, without enormously pissing people off, and without like completely robbing it of what actually makes it interesting, which is that a conspiracy theory's ability to connect to everything else. And that actually, I'm not going to be going into detail here about how this works or why this works for, sanity reasons, but I do also want to point out, I love that model. I don't know why, but I specifically remember
the fat guy?
The fat guy with the dual pistols. I will never forget it. But so conspiracy theories are largely defined by being a bunch of independent ideas that people tend to hook together, right?
Yes.
The thing, and it's, if you believe in one, you are statistically likely to believe in several. Very few people just believe in one, like, conspiracy theory. But they tend to exist in knots. They tend to exist in, like, there's certain if you have one theory, you are very likely to believe in several others that are close, and maybe a few that are further, but you're rather unlikely to believe in a theory that is, like, the opposite of it. Though you may very well, there are plenty of people there who believe at the same time mutually contradictory conspiracy theories, but they come in genres. And I was reading recently how, up until relatively recently, there were two, like, rough genres of conspiracy theory that were very popular online. There are several, but these two in question were right-wing, cultural Marxism style, sovereign citizen, libertarian influenced far right, basically the far right. And another was granola cultist. Like, the sort of people who talk about things GMOs are doing to your body, the sort of people who there's a lot of New Age spirituality wrapped in there. People like the articles I were reading talked about them like Facebook moms, and that's a big part of that demographic, but it's predates that phenomenon, you know. And one of the things that drove QAnon is that it connected those two spheres. It went through because there's the sort of health cultist. Um, there's a strong family element to it. There's a strong family focus, even though it had no like strong connection to the right. QAnon was able to basically hijack that, going through worrying about the children, and it borrowed a lot of stuff about GMOs and about healthy living and about various like weird theories about how the body works that are completely inaccurate and are based on like just feeling. And that is now very common in a lot of weird parts of the right because that they QAnon basically merged those two worlds. Um, so that's something that I thought was very feasible. I thought made a lot of sense, though. Like, you know, there are obviously areas where maybe that's not exactly what happened in a given circumstance. You know?
Yeah. Okay, so we're about to head into the city of the sun god in just a second, and we'll see the first cutscene there.
Ooh, pretty.
There's a lot of filth in the city of the sun god.
Mm-hmm. Oh boy. Uh, and I
His
loved that
badge just sort of
animation. Yeah,
magnetized to
that was
it.
beautiful.
Aren't they? I've seen all there is to see in this world, and yet, every time I return here, they steal my breath away.
He hasn't done everything that there is to be done, though.
Listen. Their song, it's also beautiful. It has kept this city of the Arten concealed since the monstrous reign of Akhenaten. The song of the sentinels has kept him silenced, chained inside his tomb, inside the Black Pyramid. It was naive of me to think it would be enough, that it would last forever. The disciples of the Arten have returned, as you well know. Akhenaten stirs in his sarcophagus. The Arten himself is awakening. This is why I have returned.
Just wait.
Perhaps for the last time. It's also why you have come, though you may not know it yet. No matter how far I travel, how long I'm away, I always return to my duty. To my children. We had sat vigil in this temple of nightmares for 3,000 years.
Mm-hmm.
It may soon be at an end one way or another. The vigil is over, and we fight. It's no longer enough to conceal this place. It must be destroyed. Each of their aspects, each of their spirits and the gods they represent will be needed, and you must help us unite them all. Only then can the Black Pharaoh be defeated. Only then can we prevent the return of the Arten itself. And only then may my children finally be free of this place, of this world.
So yeah, he's old as balls. I do, and I will never. I do love how they just turned Aten into the Eye of Sauron.
Yeah, it's. I wanted to say Isildur cast it into the fire.
Yeah, yeah.
When he said it must be destroyed, I was like, oh god, don't quote Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, God. Lord of the Rings is. I never got into it. It's too many long names. Tolkien, he really did go ham in the world building to the point where it got kind of incomprehensible. But that's part of its magic. And then Amazon made a knockoff. I don't know if you. I don't. I make a habit of not interacting with Amazon stuff much, so I don't know how it's working. I don't know if you've seen the Amazon Lord of the Rings thing.
I've seen the discourse about it, which is mostly negative and consists of people screaming about black hobbits.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people I've seen complaining about it talk a lot about like, first of all, they say the costume design is awful, just like very much Amazon approach to labor level costume design, and I've also seen them complaining it's really inaccurate and it's just hot trying to make Lord of the Rings hot and sexy, and Lord of the Rings is just the closest it comes to sexuality is like homoeroticism as written by a Catholic. It just doesn't fit very well. Whatever, I don't know.
Look, I think we can both agree that Gimli and Legolas are totally a couple.
That's true, absolutely. And I was actually rereading it, and there's a point where after they like they've been fighting and they make it to, like, I don't know, one of the woods. There's a bunch of elf woods, and basically Legolas and Gimli go off into the woods and vanish for about a chapter. And when they come back, they are the best of friends and all over each other. And I think they just kind of went off into the woods and finally fucked it out, and now they're in a relationship. I could not believe my eyes when I read that, because I know that's not what he intended, but God, it's so hard not to read it once you have that idea in your head. It just makes too much sense.
Like, I don't read Frodo and Sam as a gay couple, like some people do. To me, Frodo and Sam are war buddies. That very strong friendship between men that develops from combat. And that's something Tolkien saw firsthand in the trenches.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see them as a couple, but Gimli and Legolas, abso-fucking-lutely.
Yeah, it's really hard not to see. I was genuinely startled by how vivid it was reading it now after and God, but it is the Lord of the Rings is so long-winded. I just got bored partway through Two Towers.
It's very much he very much wrote it in the tradition of ancient sagas, which are very long-winded.
Oh,
He was building a new mythology for Britain.
Yeah, and the best part though is that all of the names that he drops, all of the people he talks about, are like, there's the Silmarillion. These days there's like the Silmarillion. You have all these wikis that you can look up. This was the first time most of that had been mentioned, because if I remember right, most of those names don't show up in The Hobbit, or if they do, they don't get that kind of attention. So it's just a hurricane of names that you don't recognize, and like weird stuff and lost continents and shit. And I was also startled by just how empty that world is. And there are parts where, like, there are whole like the bulk of the Fellowship of the Ring they spend walking through what used to be the Kingdom of Arnor, which is like, there's like one area where there's people out of this entire kingdom, and they spend in universe like months traveling through just places where people used to be and no one lives anymore. And that's not
I
something.
think people have to. I think people have to realize what Lord of the Rings is. It is post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was actually working up
This
to
is
that.
very
So
much a world. Like they explicitly mentioned, this is a world in decline.
mhm.
This is a world declining in the face of evil.
And and you read the Balrog is a massive world-ending threat, and there were about a dozen of those in earlier ages. They actively fought on battlefields as generals, and it's
My favorite little background detail is Shelob. Shelob is the son of an even worse spider creature that
right,
Melkor summoned from beyond. In other
yeah,
words, from beyond fucking um
like
Eru.
yeah,
Like the outer darkness. It's fucking straight up Lovecraft.
it's yeah, and I do love how Gandalf is an angel. He's just straight up an angel who likes to smoke weed and set off fireworks.
Well, everybody loves those things, so.
I mean, well, not everybody loves those things, but lots of people do. It makes sense. But
Listen, if you had to deal with hobbits and men and stuck-up elves every day, you would absolutely want to toke up.
well, I mean, granted, I think he picked up the weed from the hobbits and got into fireworks because he could sell them to hobbits. I think the hobbits aren't the problem; it's the men and elves. But
Pretty true, but whenever I think of hobbits, hobbits are explicitly an idealized version of the 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 pastoral England of Tolkien's
mhm.
youth. And the thing about the pastoral England of Tolkien's youth is, it's not really great.
I mean, look,
It's very much rose tinted glasses. So
let me put it this way: the reason that Samwise has red hair in the movies is because he's a very clear XP of like Irish immigrant workers that people like Tolkien worked to the bone because they didn't have any prospects back home. It's
yeah, I've read some fanfic that kind of darkens the hobbits and makes them, sharp tongued and gossipy. We
mhm,
see that Labilla Sackville Baggins is
yeah,
very much that sort of small minded patriarchal, not patriarchal,
like
patriarchal.
yeah,
Yeah, that sort of small minded, small town gossiper who's always trying to get one up on the neighbors.
hmm
Basically, Aunt Petunia from Harry Potter.
yeah, like and yeah, that's small town living, and it's that people tend to
There's a lot
idealize
of
it, but
there's a lot of good to small town living, like the knowledge that you know everyone in town and you don't really have to lock your door because, oh hey, my neighbors won't do anything. I know my neighbors.
mhm,
But small towns also hide secrets,
yeah,
and they're usually not good secrets.
yeah, it
Like in a
depends.
big city, you might get stabbed or mugged or something, but you won't fall into a cult.
Well, actually you absolutely will, but only if you're in the right kind of community in the first place, which is the problem with small towns is if you fall into a bad community, there's no escaping because it is the community. And bad community can mean very different things for different people too. But yeah, I was reading
Okay,
Lord of
see
I
that?
was
Did you see that?
what
There's an explosive up there. How the fuck is anyone supposed to get up there?
I think is climb up on a building and fall off.
Yeah, but you only have to do 10, and there are more than 10 scattered around at ground level. So there's no reason you would go up there, because there's no time limit.
I can imagine doing that as a developer just to feel clever. Like, oh, I hid this, and it's since there's no time limit, there's anything there. It's not going to hurt anybody, but because I bet it's not much I bet it's not really any harder to put it up there than it is to put it at street level with whatever
That's
tools they're
true.
using. But I was
I
reading,
mean,
yeah, I
I would have put the dope fish in this somewhere.
yeah, I mean, I was reading Lord of the Rings wiki when I was reading the books, and I realized I was kind of startled about how frequently and how badly elves screwed things up. Because I'd absorbed the sort of pop culture, elves are super perfect, Tolkien's, prototypical Mary Sue's. And then I read how, like, everything they touch eventually turns to ash. And yeah, the humans do that. That happens for everybody, but, like, they embody hubris in the background of that world. And
Well, that's very much a thing. Like, they are haughty because they are better than the primitive men. But it's that sheer hubris which prevents them from achieving anything.
yeah, it's like
They build great civilizations and they build great monuments and they advance science and art and magic. But at the end of the day, they're just so goddamn hubris. They're just so stuck up that it always comes back around on them.
Mhm. They know that they're better and they can't move past it. They get stuck on it. That's how they define themselves.
The elven man's burden.
I mean, considering their relationship to a lot of human societies.
Yeah, that's pretty much a good summation of elves. The elven man's burden.
Yeah, and
And everyone has just been doing shitty imitations of Tolkien for ever in fiction, so
I am surprised, like, but there's stuff that people don't really emulate in Tolkien.
Well, that's because people work off a very shallow pop culture version of Tolkien.
They work off the parts of Tolkien that come up in the Lord of the Rings specifically. And like
most people don't read the Silmarillion because it's a lot like reading the Bible.
Yeah, exactly. It is a bunch of tales. It's just, but like, I was really enjoying reading about new. Yeah.
I suppose we're bound to meet in time. And if there's one thing I have an excess of, it's time.
I'm shutting up for Saudi.
It's time and vices. But
I love this dude.
Strong and silent, not really my type. Ugh. Let's walk a moment. We don't need any more bugs crawling into our mouths,
No, that's a callback.
Yep.
Earthquakes, plagues, locusts. I know what you're thinking. But I'll tell you what you should be thinking. What can I get out of this? And take it from me. A mummified corpse in a 12,000-pound suit. This isn't biblical, it's local. Our entire culture was obsessed with eternity and the high cost of dying. Men queuing up to cross over, animals guarding the threshold, returning gods and demons. Musical chairs of the soul. So there will always be hangers-on, like the Arbe, a locust god, not a capital G god. The Maria have documented its exploits. They document everything. There's a library east of the village. Ever banished a man a deity? It could be downright educational for you, a real opportunity. I should charge for this. All right. It's on the house. You're killing me.
Like I said, Said seems like he'd be cool to hang out with.
I mean, like, he'd have to be convinced that you were worth his time first. But once he was, then he'd be a great time.
I'm just imagining it like that Skyrim quest where you meet like the god of partying.
Oh right, yeah.
And like you're trying to pick up your steps and you like married a hag or something.
Yes, I remember that. Yeah, you married a hag raven, the only hag raven in the game who you can actually just talk to. And you apparently boned down with her when you were blackout drunk. That's you do. God, you are very lucky. I could spend, how much of this video is left? I could spend the rest of this video talking about Skyrim lore and the rest of the next one and the one after that. But that you'd have no basis for any of it because I'd say words like chim and zero summing and arbus.
I know what chim is.
Oh, do you?
Well, I think I know what chim is, which is the most anyone can say is they think they know what chim is, because
Okay,
only oh fuck, what's his face knew what chim
Kirkbride.
was. Yes,
Yeah.
and he had
Okay.
to do
No.
mushrooms to do it to
Okay.
figure it out.
Then you do know what shim is. Okay. Because that's Michael Kirk.
Chim in Elder Scrolls, in my interpretation at least, is fourth wall awareness. The awareness that you are in a video game and the ability to manipulate the console.
Okay, so have you ever heard? Okay, that's not actually what's going on. So do you know? Okay, guess what? Guess what the rest of this video is going to be about? Do you know what? Have you ever heard the term the Godhead? In the context, well, actually in any context.
It sounds vaguely familiar. I'm sure I've heard it, but I don't believe I know the formal definition.
So the Godhead, I mean, Godhead as a term refers to a divinity, a power, like a monotheistic divinity as an entity. Like if you are talking about the Godhead as something that is like the center of all the God activity, in the world, one of the theories around the Elder Scrolls, and there is evidence that this is the case, though it's very scattered, is that it is actually the dream of somebody who did it basically.
Yeah, it's the dream of someone who died.
Nope. What happened is there's a pattern. It's called in the universe the enantiomorph, and it goes like this. There's someone in charge. There's someone who's his brother or ally, and there's a woman or someone that they care about. Two people, and that woman is usually in a relationship with one. The two of them fight. In the course of this fight, the woman is injured and ends up dying of her injuries. And during that process, she gives birth to something.
Until you said gives birth, I thought you were describing the Harry Potter the Dumbledore Grindelwald fight.
I mean, like, usually this
is a common literary motif. So
it's a common literary motif everywhere, but it has a lot of resonance. There's the bulk of the most important like theological events in the Elder Scrolls universe follow that pattern in some way. Like basically, two powers fight, but something that's a bystander is badly damaged, and whatever was badly damaged is transformed as a result of that fight, and then whoever the victor of that fight has to stand by and watch it transform. And the theory goes is that somebody was engaged in this fight and watched all of this happen. And nobody knows any details about what this even is, and went to sleep. And the entirety of the Elder Scrolls universe, the term is Arbis, Aurbis, is composed of that dream. And we know just about nothing. Like, there's some theory that the Godhead is just a guy, like an ordinary human being, and that somehow the Elder Scrolls world is a big, all-in-one guy's head. But
it's Kirkbride.
It's Kirkbride. But so moving on from that, that means that there's, on a fundamental level, everything in the Elder Scrolls world isn't real is a very relative term, but everything in the Elder Scrolls world exists in relation to that Godhead as part of that dream. So what Chim is to bottom line it, basically coming to not just learning, understanding, that that's a thing, but actually internalizing and fully coming to grips with it. And normally what happens if that happens to somebody, they do what's called zero summing.
They poof out of existence.
Yep, they go poof. Basically, they wake up within the dream and fuse with the Godhead. They, depending on who you ask, usually the interpretation is they are destroyed, they are erased from existence because they just become a part of the Godhead. There's no fusion between them. But it's entirely possible, with the right kind of mindset, with the right kind of personality, to hold on to your identity while you are undergoing this process. And once you have completed it, you are at once a part of the Godhead and an individual within the dream, which basically lets you lucid dream as much as you want and change anything, because you know, ultimately, it's like, fake isn't exactly the right word, because it's too big for that, but like, you know it's all relative, and you know that you can basically, it's all just a reflection of what you as a part of the Godhead are, since you are part of the Godhead. So you can just sort of lucid dream your way into building whatever. And like Tiber Septim, the guy who built the Empire, probably, if Chim is a real thing, he definitely hit it. And he was able to do things like, there's a lot of scattered evidence that Cyrodiil, the Skyrim, like, you know, not Skyrim, but the Oblivion province used to be jungle. Just like complete, like, you know, like tropical jungle, and he was
Amazon level jungle.
And with
Amazon level jungle.
And just by force of lucid dreaming, he turned it into the entirety of it into farmland and made it retroactively so, because he changed the nature of the dream on a basic level. And it's not quite the thing is, it's not uniform.
That's one way to retcon the fact your engine can't make a tropical rainforest.
Yep. Though the fun part is that as part of that process, one of the things that you're doing is that in order to not poof, you have to have a strong sense of self. And once you reach Chim, you are restricted to that sense of self. Like you have to act in accordance to that identity, because you're kind of bound to it, because that's what you are. That's how you didn't disappear into nothing. And if you weren't that, you wouldn't be anything. If that makes sense. So you get people like Tiber Septim built an empire because he was an empire builder, but he also died despite being able to lucid dream everything, because he was also an emperor, the first of the line. And the only other guy is a guy, if you've played the Morrowind, is Vivek. And he just sat around and watched the protagonist in Morrowind and its DLC, and its DLCs, its expansions, kill all the other gods there and drop a nuke on the local volcano and destroy the whole province, because he's a trickster and he represents change and he can't change that. But as long as you can act, as long as you aren't being compelled to do things, you know, you can do almost anything that you can think of, just as long as you can think of it. And that's one of the
the best writing in Elder Scrolls has to be, and I've seen this quote elsewhere with no not reputation, with no history. Like they haven't linked it to where it's from, but the quote from the dragon who becomes good, you know, which is more noble, to be born good or to achieve goodness through great effort. I've seen that bereft of context elsewhere on the internet. Because that is a very good line. That is a very good line.
So, okay, and speaking of things that we're spending the rest of the video talking about, so Elder Scrolls has a thing about capital T time, which is different from the time that we know, because it is a god and also a dragon. Like Akatosh, the main dragon of the guy that, if you beat Elder Scrolls 4, the guy that Martin turns into. I
found myself trapped down here, and there's no way out of the pit except dying. So it's a good thing I'm a bee and I can just die.
Yeah, you just die in universe, and it's just like, whatever.
I mean, I imagine at this point, with all the deaths, I'm pretty good with pain management.
Yeah, it's one of those things you just sort of learn it because you have to.
Like my mom, who passed away, had phenomenal toughness. Like she could withstand pain that was agonizing to other people. She didn't know I was being born. She had some mild discomfort.
What?
I was crowning, and she was like, I think I'm having contractions.
That's pretty extreme.
She had a lot of bladder surgeries when she was young, so she had like an insane pain tolerance. Like, we didn't know she had cancer until she started saying, I'm having a little abdominal discomfort. And then we go in and it's like cancer everywhere. And they're like, you should have noticed this a long time ago. And it was just because she had this phenomenal pain tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to banish a locust god. And I think it's this cutscene where he mentions that this is the remnant of a parlor trick, which is essentially a reference to Moses and the plagues of Egypt.
Oh. Did I tell you about the mud flood theory of about the 10 plagues, or have you told me about it?
I don't remember, but we probably talked about it. I remember we talked about whether or not Jewish captivity in Egypt, the Exodus, really happened.
And the question is, the answer is maybe, but not in the way that's depicted in the Bible.
This is nice.
Probably looked very different.
Very nice.
But like, okay, so the 10 plagues, to really cover quickly, all of the 10 plagues line up roughly with a rare phenomenon where basically there's kind of like a backflow further up the Nile, and it silts up with red dust from like the Ethiopian highlands. And you get, since water is like low quality, you get disease, you get animals dying in huge numbers and animals fleeing the river. You even get like climatic
shifts.
Yeah, a climatic shift that can cause like unusual darkness. They're not like dark days, but like unusual things, and that all of the plagues line up with different possible like repercussions of it. And it happened, the same thing actually happened like just a few years ago, and people were able to point out that all of those plague consequences were currently going on in different parts of like Egypt and Sudan. But you never know.
I always just find it interesting, the politics of the Bible. Like, the Bible is explicitly a political document. But it's a political document that's apolitical in our time, because the political context of the Bible is so alien to modern viewers that they don't see it.
Yeah, like, nobody cares what an Elamite is now. Like, the Elamites, their descendants are still around, but they're not. But the Bible has plenty of things to say about them. And like, people will talk about the Samaritans, and nobody understands why. We talked about this last time, I think, how a good Samaritan has a political meaning, and that is completely irrelevant to 99.999% of Christians alive today.
Okay, so there's a thing you got to do to get through that barrier. The four Western elements, are embodied by certain enemies here, and you got to kill all four of them, and then you can pass through the barrier. So earth, wind, fire, water.
That's odd. It's like, it's interesting hearing that, because the four Western elements are a very ancient Greek thing, but they were based in earlier things. But like,
I believe in the East, as if the East was one big block. Metal is one of the elements, but I could be wrong. It's been a while since I've looked at. I haven't really looked at Chinese alchemy outside of Sanzia novels, so.
Like, Shusha, I think it's what it's called, but like, metal, earth, wood, fire, and water, I think. And I know that because those are the exalted, or no, it's not. I don't think metal. Maybe metal is one of them, but maybe air is one of them. Like, there's I know that in Exalted, that those are the names of the poles and of regions in the world, and that's how I used to remember it. Except I was never really into Exalted, so I've forgotten which world parts of the world there are. But like,
I was
there's
never an
that.
Exalted fan either. It just
It's
felt too much like a power fantasy to me.
for me.
Like, wait,
Go ahead.
it explicitly mentions that you're like oppressing a peasantry, and I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, I don't want to really do that.
For me, I have the same issues for Exalted that I have for the Dragon. It's very Orientalist, and like I'd say it's a lot better about it than the Dragon is, because the dragon in this game is directly connected to the real world, even if not actually, but like it's based in real things, which makes it doubly racist. Meanwhile, this just exists in a vacuum. But there's a lot of long-winded, pretentious pseudo Asian names, assumptions about Asian society. It's just ugh.
Bad attempts to write Asian scripture.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose whatever
and they're like, look, there
Taoist
are good.
texts are like scripture.
But I mean, like, oh, there's plenty of East Asian scripture of various kinds, but like
I know.
there
I
are
was just
good.
saying, is Taoism a philosophy or is it a religion? Do you call it scripture? Do you call it?
It depends on who you're talking to. Taoism is very much the sort of thing where it can go either way. Whereas something like Confucianism is kind of, you really can't call it a religion, but you can call it. You have to call it a philosophy that takes the place of a religion. While Buddhism is both at the same time. It's like it is religion as philosophy as religion. It's complicated, but there are good parts of Exalted, like the alchemicals. From like one of the things, my first Fatal and Friends review, the thing that got me into LPing indirectly, was a big long form review of of Exalted, the alchemicals.
I just
They
remember that
are
there's an infamous Exalted book that no
there are
one likes
several
to
of
talk
those.
about.
The Infernals.
I'm talking about the one. I'm talking about the one with the rape.
Yeah,
I believe it's the
Infernals.
Infernals one. The one that's
They
all
have
about
one that's
here's
just
how
awful.
evil you can be, and it's got like gore porn in it. It's horrible.
Yeah.
It's the sort of thing that
Exalted is
goes,
a mess.
why would you think this was a good thing to publish? It's on the same level as the Gypsy source book for Vampire. But
yeah.
we're out of time. But next time we'll be doing a investigation mission.
And see you then.